Yeah, thank you so much for the nice introduction. Wow, feels good. Thanks for coming this morning. It's a full room. I didn't expect that actually, so great that you're bearing with us. So I would like to talk about whether or not guarding would reduce crop loss in Africa and Asian countries. This is actually a work, data and case studies that I have worked on during my time working with Awili Wildlife and People, a French organization that unfortunately does not exist anymore. I also did my PhD on that topic with Goethe University of Frankfurt. And because it feels a bit, and thus the results have been published with my wonderful co-authors from the different study sites. But it feels a bit long time ago that this study has been conducted. It's data-based or collected in 2009 to 2015. And so I felt, and I handed in this abstract 3 years ago, waiting for this conference to happen, and a lot has happened so far. So I felt like putting in another slide here just to give a bit of the background where we are at the moment in terms of human-wildlife conflict management. And this is a little graphic I want to share with you that has been published in the Journal of Diversity on human-wildlife conflict management framework. And this little person here stands for an integrated approach for human-wildlife conflict management, with standing on the strong foundation of policies, policy frameworks, and spatial planning. We heard about these topics a lot, I think, in this conference. But having tools in its hands on technical strategies and financial strategies, and all of that guided by rigorous monitoring and evidence-based data. But in the center, and that's the most important for me here, is the social strategies that are the core of human-wildlife conflict management. Social strategies include stakeholder engagement in all forms, from information to decision-making, educational activities, but also building trustful and transparent community representation in conflict management. And this also includes all these governance aspects that need to be considered when building up something like an integrated and inclusive human-wildlife conflict management. And what I'm presenting today, this data, is a part of a technical strategy that is used. So I'm just looking at a fraction of what I would today call human-wildlife conflict management. The data is based on data that was collected in 4 different case studies in Zambia, Tanzania, Nepal, and India. Standardized approach was used. And these areas have in common that they are located adjacent to national parks, that there is people living, farming, and subsistence farming, and they also have in common that there's a lot of wildlife around. So here, I'm not sure if this pointer works. In the middle? Okay. We have looked at all herbivores damaging crops and have clustered them into 3 different groups just for analysis. So here's the elephants. They have their own group as the largest and most heavy species here, African elephants and Asian elephants, depending on the project area. Then we have other large herbivores ranging from hippos and buffaloes, zebra, eland, to in Asia, rhinos and buffaloes and deers. And then we have the the group of medium-sized herbivores ranging from porcupines to monkeys and boars. Well, this is just for the analysis, how we did the analysis. This is about the data collection. So data was collected by trained human-wildlife conflict officers in all 4 areas using a standardized approach. They worked together with informants in the communities They took, of course, GPS locations. They did on-site observations and verification and measuring of the damage. They did interviews with, we call it victims here, I would say aggrieved parties today, and entered the data into a database for analysis. So this is like the first thing that we looked at is how often would damage occur in which kind of percentage. So here we see like these blue parts of the graphs show damage below 40% size of the field, and the gray ones is above 40%, so like really massive damage. But below 40% is also quite an effect for a farmer, right? So what we see here is that the majority of damage is below 40%, and that for the large, really large damages, mostly elephants were involved, like here in Zambia, in Nepal, and in India, in the project areas. But in Tanzania, in that particular area, we didn't find a lot of massive damage by elephants. We found massive damage by zebra and eland, which was quite a surprise because the project was supposed to be a human-elephant conflict management program. So then we looked at the lower damages below 40%. Also here, elephants played a major role, and again in Tanzania, we had wild boars and antelopes coming in. All right, so that was about frequencies, and this is about costs. So these are the main costs of the mean cost of damage caused by these three different groups of herbivores. And what we see is that there's not that much difference between the different species group. In South Luangwa, we saw that elephants caused higher cost of damage when they damaged crops compared to the medium-sized and smaller species. And in Tanzania, interestingly, the larger herbivores caused higher damages than the smaller ones, but they were not like really different to elephants in that case. In Bardia, we did not see these effects in terms of cost of damage. And then we were, of course, interested about the question, how would guarding influence these costs of damage finally? So we categorized guarding strategies in different categories. For instance, active guarding in a non-strategic way. That means farmers are sleeping out in the fields with the purpose of guarding and chasing away wildlife once it appears. And that was done in all of the study areas. But it is an unstrategic way of guarding in the way that they just chase away wildlife when it comes, right? There's no plan of where to chase it to. They might even chase it to the neighboring field. And then there was an area in Manas in India where there was strategic guarding implemented. So that was like Machan watchtowers just here at the forest edge where people were guarding in a cohesive and coordinated way and chased away wildlife once it appeared back to the national park. Another guarding strategy that we found was what we would call passive guarding, means people sleeping nearby their fields, not within the fields, and they're sleeping, so they're waking up once someone is alarmed and hears that wildlife is approaching, and then would rush out and chase wildlife with whatever means they have. And we found barriers like very simple electric fences in Bardia and some thorny bushes in Tanzania. And then we also found combination of these measures. So guarding, in this case, active guarding plus a fence just here at the boundary. All right, so what we did is we wanted to know, would these guarding strategies have an effect on the cost of damage the farmers have. And now this looks a bit busy, but I'll guide you through this, this slide. So here in the top row we have the data from South Luangwa, then from Tanzania, from Bhalia in Nepal, and from Manas in India. And here we have the elephants in the first row, then we have our other large herbivores, and then we have our medium-sized herbivores there. So what we found is that we didn't see too many effects. I should tell you. Within the plots, we have the mean cost of damage. And the first one, it's like our control, because there was no protection measure in place. So this is, the white one is damage on fields, but no protection measure. Then comes active guarding, then comes active guarding and a barrier, passive guarding, and passive guarding plus barrier, and barriers only. So then we wanted to, we had a look and went up and down with our statistic models to see what would have effects. And we saw some effects, but effects that we actually didn't really want to see. For instance, here in Bhalia, when elephants were involved and active guarding and a barrier existed, cost would rise instead of decrease. So that's an effect we actually didn't want to have, right? You don't want to increase the cost of damage when you are guarding and really investing time and money into protection or prevention measures. Similarly, in South Luangwa, we had increased cost through passive guarding when it comes to other large herbivores, and we had increased cost with active guarding in Bhalia, also when it comes to other large herbivores. We did see some effects that we wanted to see, like a reduction of cost compared to the control, when passive guarding and barriers were involved in Bhalia for the larger herbivores. And we saw a positive effect, or actually a negative effect, reducing costs when it came to active guarding against elephants in Bhalia, and this was the cohesive and coordinated guarding. So what were the conclusions that we drew out of this? Well, the conclusion, of course, first is that strategic and cohesive community-based guarding would be able to reduce crop loss and cost of damage, but also that non-strategic guarding and especially in combination with fences would increase damage and cost of damage. And that is a very important message that we got out of here, because this is, we talked in another session about failures, and this is a classical thing that can happen. It was put up in good intention, but what happened, in fact, was an increase of cost of damage. So it also shows the importance to monitor the effects of management systems, and that's why I asked that question about monitoring. I think it's really, really important to look closely to the effects, because in some cases we might have effects we did not expect and also did not intend to have. And it also shows that monitoring data, human-wildlife conflict monitoring data, can be used for such a bit more detailed, sophisticated statistical analysis when it's set up in a standardized way and carried out rigorously. And that's something I wanted to share with you, and happy to discuss a bit further, but not before I thank my partners and all those financial supporters of the project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've got time for one very quick question before the next presenter.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk. I'm sure you've thought about this, so I'm sure you have an answer to it, which is that if you've erected a fence and a watchtower, it's because you've invested, because you've already had a massive experience of crop raiding or crop foraging. So how can you really control for the prior investment in these crop protection things, you know, when you come to your monitoring.
Yeah.
So it's not really failure, it's a question of...
No. It's a very important question, because when you put up a fence, actually the idea is to stop any damage, to prevent any damage beforehand. So once wildlife has overcome the fence, is already, the measure has already been reduced. So it won't reduce the cost any further, right? That needs to be considered here. And just the massive amount of damage that we had in areas where there were fences showed that there was some sort of problem with the fence. That's something I would say. But we cannot, and that's a very important point you're pointing out here, we are not comparing against the situation that we had before. Yeah? So ideally we would have our control in the very beginning before any activity or any measure would have been implemented. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. It's one more round of applause.